Mi nombre es Maite, trabajo en el área de arte y pensamiento y voy a contarle un poco cuáles van a ser los programas públicos de la muestra de Diane Arbus. Este es uno de ellos, a pesar de que la muestra aún no haya iniciado, y lo voy a presentar ayer. Además de las conferencias magistrales, que serían esta y la del jueves próximo a las 18 horas en el auditorio, la exposición que reúne estos programas, digamos, hace foco en la complejidad de la cultura norteamericana de la década del 50 y 60, años que han sido clave en la renovación de las ciudades y sus modos de vida, así como de los lenguajes artísticos que han dado cuenta de ella. La programación incluye un seminario de literatura estadounidense contemporánea dictado por Anna Kazumi-Stahl, que recorre la obra de Sharon Olds, Joyce Carol Oates, Toni Morrison, entre otros. Un curso sobre fotografía y ciudad dictado por Alberto Goldenstein, en donde a través de una mirada personal se pondrá en relación el trabajo fotográfico de Lee Friedlander, Walker Evans o Robert Frank, obras de fotógrafos viajeros del siglo XIX o imágenes de las ciudades del siglo XXI que construyen, por ejemplo, Thomas Strath o Wolfgang Tillmans. Un recorrido sonoro y teatral basado en los escritos de Arbus, coordinado por Mercedes Halfon, y programas especiales para niños, escuelas y adultos a cargo del equipo educativo. Quería agradecer por último muy especialmente a la Embajada de Estados Unidos por todo su apoyo, a Jeff, quien además de su trabajo en el Met y en la exposición, es uno de los mayores expertos en la obra de Diane y de fotografía norteamericana. Y los voy a dejar con Kelsey.
Good morning. My name is Kelsey Ward, and I'm the Cultural Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy. I just wanted to thank Malba for hosting us today and for Jeff for being here. We work strongly to support exchange opportunities between the United States and Argentina, between institutions and art and culture, and more than anything, between people. So it's a real honor to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming. If you need anything from the U.S. Embassy, we're here and happy to be involved, and are so glad to see our partnership with Malba continue. So thank you, and with no further ado, we'll leave it to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. And vamos a tener un breve corte en medio. Nos vamos a volver y hablar sobre Diane. Y en ese corte espero, por favor, tener todos los tickets, que no lo hicimos antes porque no están abiertas las cajas todavía, pero cuando hagamos el corte pueden acercarse conmigo y me quedo con la entrada. Muchas gracias a todos. Gracias, Jeff.
Good morning. My Spanish is not so good. I can understand a bit more than I can speak. It's an honor to be back in Buenos Aires and to have this little talk with you all. This will be informal. I see you have notebooks. I feel like I'm your teacher, and I'm not. I'm your friend, and we can have a discussion, I hope, together. You can interrupt me. You can challenge me. I hope you will. This can be a dialogue between us. I'm very excited to be here at Malba. It's the first time I have done an exhibition in this building. It's a great building to work in, and the team here is great, so I want to thank them wherever they are. The show opens on Thursday. You've seen some advanced press, which has focused a lot on the biography of the artist, and that's one way of reading the achievement and the legacy of any picture maker. It's not the only way. Probably the best way is to actually look at the pictures. I can't invite you upstairs because we're still hanging the show, but we can look at some works together and think about what this great American artist did. I am the keeper of her archive. I'm a lucky guy. I've worked at the Metropolitan Museum for 30 years. I started in the print department. There was no separate photography department. And then in 1992, we became a breakaway republic. We split from the print department because they weren't allowing us to do what we needed to do. And we rode the wave of the rise of the interest in photography. and I'm very pleased to be here to be able to share the show with Argentina, the city, obviously. We have two choices, and because this is going to be a family affair, and I don't want to be making all the decisions, I have put together a kind of intense thing on Arbus herself, which we can launch into right now. Or I can do a kind of history of photography, looking at the Metropolitan Museum's collection as the base. That would take us from the 19th century to now, and we can do it in any order. And I had thought we should start with Arbus and then work backwards, use her as the filter, but I can invert that and go the other way. Okay. Okay. Then it's Arbus first. Okay. So let me set up her. Well, first of all, has anyone seen any exhibitions on Arbus anywhere? Yes.
The last one
At the Met. Okay. So I don't know, I've done as much research. I don't think there has been an exhibition on Arbus in Argentina. And I don't think there's been an exhibition on Arbus in South America. And in fact, this is part of the story about why I was interested. So she was born in New York in 1923. And she died in 1971 at the age of 48. She took her own life. She committed suicide. She really only worked on her own with photography for 15 years, from 1956 to till her death in 1971, which is a very short period of time. And yet, she worked intensely. She loved life. She did suffer from depression, but the pictures were an affirmation of what she believed was the creativity of being a person, being an individual. And here we are looking at a picture of her. It was made by a guy named Dan Budnick, who's a friend. He's a photographer of many subjects. This is a picture in 1967 when she had her first show. It was with Lee Friedlander and Gary Winogrand at the Museum of Modern Art. You can see that she's wearing a kind of 60s mod, very cool. I don't know if it's a dress, a coat, a combination of dress or coat, but she was very stylish, and her family business, not her business, but her family's business was the department store, just like you would have here. This was a department store, not at the top, not at the bottom, but right in the middle. And clothing was something that the windows were obviously decorated with. And she's got go-go boots on, I think they're white. And she was charming. And people were attracted to her because of her persona that she presented. If you're going to be a photographer, I would say, and you're going to work on the street, which she did, and if you're going to use the camera in the way she did, which she did not hide it from her subjects, she wanted everyone to know that she was an artist, and that her instrument was her camera, and that this was a dialogue that she was having. Her peers, like Lee Friedlander and Gary Winogrand, Cartier-Bresson, was not exactly a peer, but she knew, and all other street photographers generally hid what they were doing. They would photograph very quickly, take the image, and move on. They did not want to be observed. Arbus felt like the relationship between her subjects was critical to the psychological profile she was searching. And as I said, she had a kind of beguiling personality. And we can talk about that a little bit. And I'm sure we all know of people. This is not about photography. This is about us. We all know people that we will share secrets with and tell stories to about our inner self, more than we will to our lovers, to our parents, to our siblings, to our children. They are mediums, I don't know if you have the word in Spanish, medium. And they tell us who we are in a certain sense, but they also receive from us things we are not so aware we are sharing. And the best of Arbus's photographs, and the show, as I said, is going to look at upstairs, is going to look at half of her career, the first half. It's never been done, but we'll look at the whole just now. But the best of her photographs, and this is one of the ones we're using in the exhibition, the best of her photographs get past the superficial problem of communication very quickly. And I don't always know how that works, but maybe we can discuss it. So now I'm going to sit down because I feel like I don't want to be looking down at you, and we're just going to look at some pictures together, and we can have a discussion. And I feel like we're going to do this for about 40 or so minutes, then we're going to take a break, and I'm going to work on the lighting of the show, and then we'll meet again, and we'll kind of do a history photography which will surround this. Sound good? Okay, any questions? Please.
¿Alguna pregunta, por favor? En castellano o en inglés, como quiera.
Bueno, vámonos. Okay, so I can't really see the image, but I think I can look at it here. Well, let me ask the question. So it's very hard to have a direct communication without stopping traffic when you're working on the street, literally. You're walking down the street. Buenos Aires is just like New York, by the way. Okay? It really is. I feel so comfortable here. I don't know whether it's the people who are here, or the way I feel here, or just the shape of the street. I just sort of feel like, or I should say New York is very much like Buenos Aires. Okay. Okay. There's a street language. And there are taxis everywhere, and you have more cars than any place I've ever been, it seems, per capita. I just sort of feel like it's like a car city. The way this picture works, there's sort of, it has a kind of Shakespearean thing. There's a protagonist who, let's say, is the taxi driver, and he is in some sort of nonverbal dance with the photographer. And then there are the passengers who have their own thing. And this picture is sort of split in half. And what I like about it is, and this is the beginning of her career as a photographer. She's 33 years old. She was given a, well, first of all, should I do a little riff on the biography? Yeah? Okay. She was born in New York. Second kid, older brother. Parents have this department store. She's precocious. She's a serious reader of as much as she can, even as a young kid. I think she matured at the age of 13 and was the person that she became then. When I was 13, I was not the person that you're looking at. I promise you. And I, was not able to see what I wanted to do with my life then. I was interested in photography, and that's why I'm here today. But beyond that, it took me a long time to mature. When she was 13, she was already in love with a man who became her husband as soon as it was allowed, which was when she was 18. But that relationship that helped her mature, and she married a guy who was a photographer, defined her relationship to the world. But so did her older brother, who was became the poet laureate. Oh, isn't this good? Okay, gracias, my God. He was a poet, And they talked about the world of ideas through just a sibling relationship. She could draw and paint, and she could write. I'm going to read a little bit of writing. She loved Chaucer, and I'm going to read you her high school, little part of a high school essay that she wrote about Chaucer when she was 17. And you can see the whole photographic life unfold from it. I'll do that in a moment. She graduated from high school at the age of 18. A week later, she turned 18, and she married her husband. And he gave her a camera as a kind of a wedding present. Changed her life. Remember that. Okay. Something as simple as that, pardon me. Okay, so when they got married, it was at the sort of the beginning of World War II, so in 1941. And he almost immediately went away and joined the Signal Corps and was sent to Burma and was a war photographer. And she kept doing photography. And when he returned, she had mastered on her own as an autodidact this medium. And they started a business right after the war. And they made photographs in the fashion genre, mostly for the family business, just pictures of gloves and dresses, terrible stuff. And she was the stylist, and he was the photographer. And they proceeded along, and they did jobs for magazines and the family business. And in 1956, after about 10 years of doing this, and she was really not it was not what she wanted to do. She told her husband, Alan, who I knew very well, I did not know Diane, that she was done with the business. And she took a class with Lisette Model, the expatriate Viennese photographer living in New York. Now, she had already taken a class with Alexei Brodovich and Berenice Abbott, you know these names. So it's not like she was just idly self-taught. She studied with, Brodovich was the great Russian designer, very famous guy, legendary guy. Berenice Abbott was the woman who acquired Eugene Atget's negatives, was a student, Abbott worked in Man Ray's studio in Paris, and she did a big project called Changing New York, which was about the old and the new in New York. So, all of this is to say that by the time she left the family business, if you will, the photography business, she was ready for something new, and that's where the story begins. And in 1956, she made a picture like this, or like this great one. And she started numbering her rolls of film. And she started in 1956 with number 1, and now I'm pleased to say the Met has her archive, which is kind of where this show comes from. And she made about 6,000 rolls of film. Now, I'm sure there are some photographers in the room. These are 35 millimeter and 2 1/4 square. So the 2 1/4, the 6 by 6, is only 12 frames per roll. The 35 millimeter was about 36. It's not that much photography. It sounds like it's, well, who shoots film here? Not a 1. 1, 2, 3, 5. Everyone is very shy. Okay, so how many rolls of film have you shot? 1,000? 10,000? 100? Okay, the point is.
20,000.
Yeah. So you're young too.
Soy joven también. Should believe that.
So, what's exciting to me is that she made every frame count. Often it's one picture per subject. But I know from looking at those rolls of film, and we're going to look at some, that she waits until the subject returns her gaze. This is not how any photographer of her generation worked. Okay.
Perdón, vos decís que sacaba una foto por modelo, por sujeto.
In the first 5 years, más o menos. Uno. Because it was a dialogue. And she waits and waits. And now remember, she's working in the street or in the bus, or it's a crazy way of working. Okay?
Just waiting or talking to the
Okay, now I have to show you. Okay. I don't like sitting behind the thing. So we're on the street. It's just like here, people are going both ways, the cars are going by. And she would stand in the middle of the street with her camera around her neck and wait until people returned her gaze. That is a very aggressive, very powerful thing. People had to walk around her. I can see it in the pictures. But what she was waiting was for that thing. It's theater. It's performance. It is. It is another way of being an artist. And it would work today just like it worked for her then. Okay. Okay, so that's what he was waiting for. Did you see that? Okay, thank you. I thought I could get somebody to play the game. Oh. Okay. So the traveling show that I've organized, which opened at the Met, which you're going to see on Thursday, has about 100 pictures in it, and it looks at the first 7 years. And why? Because she worked with 35 millimeter until, you can see the format, until around 1962 when she got a square format camera, and it changed her working, and that's the work most people know. But when I acquired her archive for the Metropolitan, and we are now the repository for her life work, that's all of her negatives, all of her diaries, all of her work prints, her collection of other artists, her library, which is unbelievable, and her diaries and appointment books. I should say that she not only confronted people in this nonverbal way, but often she then introduced herself. And many times we see a picture on the street, and then 20 rolls later, we're in the person's living room or bedroom. Now, how many of you have ever met someone on the street, don't tell me, and then invited them into, invited the photographer, I mean, into your home? It doesn't happen. It is a crazy thing, and we're going to see this happen a lot in artists. So she worked in this really interesting moment in the late 50s and early 60s at a time that was changing in the world, not just in the US, but around the world. And it was a kind of a dramatic moment for an artist, a woman artist, to emerge. And when she developed her sort of idiosyncratic style and subject matter and technique, she was immediately criticized for it, and has been criticized for it, even in your press here, to be honest. The advanced press of the show has been very intense, but, you know, they've described her as a monster, and that her choice of subject matter was about a kind of psychological trauma in some way. And unfortunately, and this is true for all artists and individuals who take their lives, their own lives, that moment is used to foreshadow, or the opposite of foreshadow. yeah, something, cast a shade back into the past, so that now we have to look at each picture and each piece of writing, knowing that she's going to commit suicide years later, which is a terrible way of looking at anything. Okay. I think that the reason her voice is so clear and her achievement so great and her poetry so profound is that all of us are searching for our own identity at every point in our life, not just when we're adolescents, not just during puberty, but when you will see this here and you will see it at any show. The people who are getting the most out of it are teenagers who are asking those questions. How do I become the person I want to be? How do I overcome my genetics, the body I've been born into? How do I become the person I want to be? How do I divorce myself from all the shit around me to become who I am? This search for identity, this existential quality comes from her way of looking at the world. And kids love the show, and old people. She looks at how do we become parents? What does it mean to be a sibling? Why are we with the people we are with? It happens over and over. Anyway, I think this is a show that no other artist can provide, in that it takes us out of photography and into these sort of larger, personal, existential qualities. The archive that I brought to the museum has some 700 photographs. I chose about 100 of them. There are some key loans from individuals. But I think you're going to love it. So I told you that she was a really terrific writer. And just want to read a few things in a second. We see people in this picture responding to her in this way. A woman with a camera in the 1950s was still something of an exception. I think that's no longer the case. I teach at NYU and Bard, at Columbia University, at Cooper Union. I've lectured at Harvard and Yale, Tulane. I've lectured all around the world. And the art schools are filled with women photographers, which I think is fabulous. That was not the case. But she studied with two fabulous women, Bernice Abbott and Lisette Nardell. She sought them out. So another question is, what is the gender issue of a woman picture maker? And we can talk about it maybe as a group. This is one of the sort of famous quotes. You can read it. This is difficult. Través.
Nada es, nunca nada es lo mismo.
Nada nunca es lo mismo, nunca nada es lo mismo.
It's hard.
Es
un poquito difícil.
A lo que dicen que fue.
Carlos.
Sure. What?
Yes?
¿Sí o no, Carlos? La segunda
The second part is the hard part.
es lo que nunca he visto antes de...
Pero que yo
¿De qué
reconozco. Es lo que nunca vi,
Antes
pero
de
que yo
no,
reconozco.
pero que reconozco.
Eso. Y la anterior creo que es nada es,
Nada es.
nunca.
Sí, nada nunca, lo mismo.
Lo mismo que como se lo
que-
puede describir. Nada
que
es como se
dicen
lo
que
puede
es,
describir.
que dicen que es.
Okay. Is that it? Okay. The point is, even in English, you have to read and reread because there is something hiding even in what she is saying, like there is in the pictures themselves. And she also said, it's not on the screen, but she said a photograph is a secret about a secret. The more it tells you, the less you know. Okay. Little bit of biography. Her pictures of kids are some of my favorites. She was often with her two daughters when she was photographing. She was a single mother for most of the time, even though she was married. They lived separately. And she did her work often with her kids by her side. And this is the kind of a picture that is about something that is hiding behind, which is the photographer and her social condition. Photographs seem to be about the subjects, but you know, and if you don't, you must, that they are a mirror of what's on the other side. That's why photography is such a great medium. It looks in one direction and in the other direction simultaneously. I mean literally, and I mean figuratively. Let's just look at the way this picture works. You guys are not talking with me. Okay. Okay, so, where is she? That is, where is Arbus?
Ya.
Only in the street? Or is she in the street and on the sidewalk?
Claro.
Okay, where is the subject?
Same.
Okay, so this is the easiest one for me to explain what I'm talking about. Okay? The street and the sidewalk, it's inside, outside, it's you know, it's every dichotomy, it's everything you want it to be, okay? She's stalking this kid. In today's world in the US, I don't know, she would be thrown into jail, okay? This kind of aggressive attitude is dangerous. It's like, first of all, what I like is that the kid, first of all, it's empty. This is like, how could New York be like this? Okay, it's very early in the morning, the kid is going to school, she's holding her school books. And Arbus is mirroring that, holding her school book, which is a camera, right? We don't know where little Amy and little Dune are, but this is like in the first 10 rolls of photographs she made on the street of the city. It's a very, very, very interesting thing, and she's a student of Lisette Model when she makes this picture. So, anyway, we can just look at the pictures. So you know, I work at the Metropolitan Museum. I'm been there for a long time, 3 decades, and I've been interested in Diane Arbus's work, you know, for years and years. I get the archive, I bring the archive, I begin cataloging with my colleague Karen, who is somewhere, I wonder if she's here this morning, and I'm looking through the prints, I'm looking through the rolls of film, and there are pictures of the Metropolitan Museum. And what's really interesting is that I know this painting because it's actually at the Met, and there is this picture of it. It's like, why me, why this? But this is a typical Arbus picture in that she's looking at a woman who is being, if you will, projected onto a canvas of a woman, and the painter is a copyist, and we know she was a woman. So if you could read the text that is attached to the bottom of the frame, it's a woman painter who's working in the workshop of Hans Holbein, and we have Arbus. So how many layers back does it go, this kind of thing? This is not just circumstance, it's not just me selecting this. This is Arbus thinking about her role as an image maker in the tradition of image making. Arbus found most of her subjects in New York, which was her city. And yet, I think her art partly was to be able to see it as a foreign place. Just a little lesson to you who are picture makers. If you can separate yourself from your world just enough to see it as a foreign land, it's a pretty exciting way to begin work. Yes? Dígame.
en algún momento, te interrumpo, pero en algún momento, si podés, me gustaría que nos cuentes un poquito quién ponía los títulos de las fotos y cómo se vincula con la imagen, porque a mí me resulta que de leer los títulos me introduce en una forma de leer la imagen espectacular.
Great. Gracias. Okay.
¿Puedo hacer una pregunta también? Disculpa si te interrumpo, pero quería preguntarte en relación a los retratos, donde el protagonista de la foto la mira. ¿Pensás que ella elige a ese protagonista o es el protagonista el que la elige?
I used to think she chose her
Yo no soy
subjects.
fotógrafa, soy
Yes,
psicoanalista.
I used to think she chose her subjects, and now I know they chose her.
Ellos la eligen a ella.
Okay.
Okay.
Me parecía.
So one more time. Yes. You understand? Does everybody understand that? It's kind of a radical idea, but it's exactly how it works. Okay.
Sí.
Who chose the titles? I'm not smart enough to have made up these titles. The titles are hers. And she spent hours working on her titles. Okay. And her titles are the poet, the other part of the poet of Diane Arbus coming through. Okay. What do we know of the barbershop? I don't know. I assume the barbershop around the world. It's the place of male privacy. It's, you know, it's our therapy office. Okay. It is a hidden place. Women are not historically allowed in. And look what she gets to do. Look at this picture. She gets the barber, not just one, two barbers, to be her subjects from out on the street. So this is again this metaphor, from outside looking in. We're going to get in very quickly. So this is still the first weeks of her work, literally in the first year of her photography. All of this. None of these pictures had been seen before. I'm introducing 2/3 new pictures, but for you all, I'm introducing all new pictures, I guess, so it's fine. But anyway, she even got kids to kind of respond to her because she had power. Nothing to do with the camera. She was a power figure. She was commanding, beguiling. I don't know what beguiling is in Spanish. And she was particularly drawn to the relationships between people. We're going to look at couples. We're going to look at parents with their children. How do parents learn to hold a child? What is the relationship that connects us all? These kind of dramatics are very much a part of her work. She liked working at night, and she liked thinking about spectral quality, where photography is a medium of light and dark. She made her own prints. She gave her own titles, and she found subjects that were generally not subjects for the camera in the form. She rendered, she described things that, she described things strangely that were very normal. She discovered the familiar in the exotic. And I think there's a sort of shocking purity to her work. And the idea of the camera and the gun, it's a typical relationship. You shoot a photo. What do you say in sacar un foto. It's not shoot. But,
Sacar una foto.
yeah. See, so, yeah. So here, look what's going on. There's this mirroring going on. The kid knows that she has a dangerous tool in her hands, or a beautiful one. I told you I'd show you a roll of film. So this is roll 103. Can you see? It was made in 1957, so the second year. And by the way, the sticker I did not put on, but I want you to see how the frames are. How many of the same subject are you looking at? In the middle top, there's the person who's the Mr. Peanut. There's two, but for the most part, every other one is one. That is very atypical. Okay. This is a place you go to the carnival, and you put a quarter in. You put some money in, and it tells you what your sexual potency is. Whether you're frigid or ardent or tender or harmless, irresistible, excitable, lovable, torrid, fiery. And I really do believe that even though she's this monster, as your press describes her, she was tender. And obviously we don't know if she put the money in and grabbed the thing or not, but she gets credit for it. But, you know, for a curator, this kind of expression of personal self-identity is pretty rare and pretty hard to find. So these pictures often have very strong, blown out highlights, deep shadows. She's not afraid of darkness. She's not trying to be the perfect balance of photography and highlights and shadows. They're very distinctive. You can, most part, know you're looking at a Diane Arbus photograph when you see one. She made photographs everywhere in the city. She was one of the first artists to photograph in movie theaters and off the television set. She loved film noir. She was fascinated by horror movies. She loved this guy Bela Lugosi. I'm sure you know him well. You know the story about Dracula. He cannot be in the light. He has to be, he only has his powers at nighttime. So the idea of photographing Bela Lugosi in his role of Dracula is very interesting to me because it's on the TV screen. So I asked the two kids, you know, not a lot of people had television sets in 1958, and they did not. She had to go to a friend's house to photograph. But you know, it's not like it is today, where you can queue up anything you want. She had to wait for this moment. And so anyway, this idea of the eyes, the staring from the screen, this illumination in darkness is the perfect way to do it. Anyway, I love this picture. The magic box of the television and the magic box of the photograph is pretty great. Stuff happens in Arbus that you just don't find anywhere else. People say that she was like an anthropologist with a camera. I don't know, but she photographed, as I said, kids and carnival performers, nudists, middle-class families, transvestites, eccentrics, and a few celebrities. But it's about an allegory of the human experience. That is her goal, is that her collective idea is something about appearance and identity, illusion and belief, these things that are not necessarily opposites, and theater and reality, as in this. We know she was searching for something, and the camera was going to lead her there. And that search is my search too, and I'm sure it's your search. What are we doing here? What are we looking for? How do we know whether we've achieved it? What do we do with it when we get there? She was particularly interested by people who are changing their gender identity. This is a time long before the gender political world in which we live. She never photographed female impersonators on stage. She was only interested in photographing them in the act of transformation from man to woman. And the question is, why did they participate? And it's a question I don't have the answer to. But we're backstage. And they're some of the most extraordinary pictures, both spectrally, because of the lights in the mirrors, and how much is shared, that experience. She's often photographing her subjects in the mirror as they are making up. So we talk about photography either being a window or a mirror. It can be both, and here we are. We're back at the Met. Again, I just love these things. This isn't even in the show, but I just thought I'd show it to you. She seemed to be able to get even these ancient Assyrian sculptures to tell their secrets to her. That's how much power she had. They seem to be able to come alive. And I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but I believe it. She saw them for what they were. And these are some of my favorite sculptures from that, by the way. But it's not so far from here to here. How does this work? How is she able to, you must have something like Coney Island close by. You go to the beach when it's summertime, and it's filled with people. And yet, in the hands of an artist, she's able to separate the individual from the crowd. And that's maybe the other thing about artists that I like so much. The tensions that we all have. I bet everybody took a sociology class when you were in school. The first thing I remember is Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Does anyone know what that is? Come on. Gemeinschaft, the German term, Gemeinschaft, Gesellschaft. So the tensions that we all go through in life are how do we maintain our individuality and how do we fit into the society. The job of the individual is to profoundly define their individuality, both in the family and in the community. And the job of the community and the society is to keep every one of those individuals together in the society. And the tensions that we all face are in those oppositions. Is this guy arriving at the beach and has thrown his clothes down and has not yet taken his shoes and socks off? Or is he on his way home? We don't know. This is this liminal stage between one thing and another. And these are issues of identity that she explores over and over. I can't say anything about this.
Do you think that...
Yeah, good. Speak up.
By exploring that, well, when she took pictures of the female impersonators,
yeah.
Do you think they kind of... ¿Cómo se dice? Se relacionan
that those are related
con el hombre en la playa, por ejemplo,
to
con
the
esta
men at the
ambigüedad,
beach with this
está
ambiguity,
diciendo como,
that
o sea, el hecho de que
the fact
sea una cosa medio ambigua, una
that it's
cuestión de que
ambiguous,
dijiste vos
as you said,
de una búsqueda,
it's a search,
es lo que ella está queriendo
what
representar.
she
una
wants to
búsqueda de-
represent actually.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Sí,
So I
eso
think
sí.
that the questions,
Yo creo que las preguntas,
that what you're saying is true. The questions in the picture reflect our own questions. This is the search. So the man at the beach is either coming or going, we don't know. What is she doing? Why is she doing what she's doing? And what am I doing looking at it? This female impersonator is transforming himself from a man to a woman and has to imagine what that will be. Arbus herself is in that same search. That is the struggle. And we have this every day. We just suppress it. We hide it. How do you, look, how do you become a parent? How do you manage being a child? My mother is 90 years old, and if she doesn't call in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to eat my hat. Okay. I haven't spoken to her for 5 days, and it's killing her. Okay. So, this search in the hands of a great artist is what we've always asked. It's in Rembrandt. It's in Velázquez and Goya. It's in all the greatest artists. It's in Fellini. Okay. It's in our greatest literature. Yeah. Let's look at a few more.
It's,
Okay.
Tempest.
Okay, we're doing pretty good. She was fascinated by the circus. Who becomes a circus performer? And this is something that runs throughout her work. Individuals who do not fit into the society, the traditional society, but have found a home in the circus for one reason or another. And she was interested. She almost always photographs them backstage. How did this happen? She's not interested in the individual when they are, in the circus anyway, when they are fully in the role. She's interested in then what happens when they're not in the role and they're still in the circus. So, also, she was fascinated by backlighting. For those of you who are photographers, she managed this in a pretty unbelievable way. The number one rule is put the light behind you, right? No, never photograph in the light. And you'll see it over and over. She loved the way the light wrapped around the faces and bodies of her subjects. They're not sharp. She did not demand the photograph being this sort of rigid thing. She allowed light to wrap, and this is a good example. I said that she was interested in children becoming adolescents, adolescents becoming adults, adults becoming parents, people aging and then dying. She was fascinated by photographing people in the morgue. See? People on their deathbeds. Nothing escaped her. This man can, you can read it, swallow razor blades. But he doesn't really know how to hold his own child because he's never had one before. He is holding the child for her. And yet, you know, if you've ever held a child, when you're beginning, you don't know how to do it. And there's something about this. I love the fact that the tent has been pulled up. It's just a very, very interesting picture to me. Yeah.
No había visto nunca esta fotografía previamente.
Good.
Y me impresiona porque teóricamente se puede pensar que en la obra de Rineke Dijkstra hay mucho de Arbus. Y hay una Rineke Dijkstra, hay una fotografía de una recién madre de Rineke Dijkstra en esa serie que ella tiene con que el gesto de la mujer es absolutamente idéntico al de esta fotografía y es impresionante.
Yes. Rineke Dijkstra is a great artist. Danish?
Mi holandés es muy malo.
Yes.
Holandesa.
She's Dutch.
Dutch.
Hola.
Dutch. One of her, for those of you who don't know, one of her projects is to photograph mothers with their newborn, literally right after birth. They're holding to bond with the child, and often the blood of the birth is present, running down the mother's legs, and it's shocking and so beautiful. And I don't know if Dijkstra knew this picture, but she certainly knew Diane Arbus's photographs. And she is exploring many of these same issues. She photographs matadors, she photographs young soldiers, she photographs bathers on the beach. She photographs those same stages of becoming that artist does.
Transición.
Yes.
La transición, momento de crisis,
Right.
de la niñez a la adolescencia.
Right.
From
Yes,
child to
yes.
teenager.
Right, but this is what Shakespeare is about too.
Pero Shakespeare está
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this is nothing new.
Con Shakespeare no es nada nuevo.
So the search for identity takes really interesting turns in Arbus's work. So these are, boy, this is going to be difficult.
Ahí vamos.
In the carnival world, this is called a pickled punk. Okay. You know what a pickle is?
Sabemos lo que es un
It's
pickle,
in
¿no?
vinegar.
Es del vinagre, un
Okay.
pepinillo en vinagre.
So it's something that has been preserved.
Algo que ha sido preservado, ¿no? Una conserva.
Okay, and Siamese twins
Y los siameses, los niños
are
siameses,
pickled.
están acá como
Not pickled, but you
en
know.
conserva,
Okay,
decimos, ¿no? En formol, decimos.
And, yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. And they are sold from carnival to carnival.
Van pasando
And you have to
las
pay
cosas de los
extra to see
carnavales y
them.
uno paga aparte para
And they
ver
just
el-
light them. And this is the whole show.
Y este es el show es poder verlo.
This is what you're paying to see.
Uno paga para poder ver esto.
It's about your worst fear.
Es los peores temores de uno.
She was interested in individuals who would share their stories with her in any way they could. This is one individual. He's called the Backwards Man. That was his stage name. He was a contortionist who could turn his body, pivot his body. So you can see his feet are going this way, and his body is, this is not a trick, he actually could do it.
Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Yeah. But look at the structure of the picture. And this idea that we're in his hotel room is very important. And he's wearing a clear raincoat.
Y él está teniendo un piloto.
It's surreal.
Es algo surreal.
So, but I just want to say,
Pero
in many of these
si
pictures,
vemos muchas de estas fotos,
she shows you the door jamb.
puerta,
I don't know what you call the structure. On the right side and the left side is the edge. She's outside, just like she is outside the barber shop. See what I'm saying when you see the show. She embeds in the physical composition of the picture a frame to let you know that you are trespassing by looking.
Como una invitación al interior
like
del
an
otro.
invitation of the other person's interior.
Correct. And it is a psychological thing that you don't even know is affecting you, and it is affecting you. This is why her work was so severely criticized negatively for so many years, that she seems to have violated social order by forcing us to see something we should not. Yes.
¿Está relacionado esto con las fotos, por ejemplo, donde se ven los apoyabrazos de los sillones, como si uno estuviese sentado dentro de la escena?
Yes, there's one in the show, yes.
Hay uno en la
Yes,
muestra,
sí, sí. Igual.
Es igual.
Notice we are in people's homes. By 1959 or 1960, she's working herself from outside to inside. So in the 15 years from 56 to 71, we begin to see that she's now meeting people, and she's getting more confident, and she is meeting people who are quite eccentric, and she works inside. This is a man who thought he was Uncle Sam. Okay, so Uncle Sam is, you know what Uncle Sam is. He didn't have a day job, and just for fun he dressed up as Uncle Sam. He was always Uncle Sam, and he thought he was Uncle Sam. And now we're getting many pictures. So the rolls of film, it's all about Uncle Sam, because now we're inside. So this thing that's on the street changes a little bit as she moves forward. Look at the light burning through the window, burning in this direction. Many backlit pictures. And she's going even more further into this inner sanctum. This is a stripper. I don't know what stripper is. Stripper. In the back room, and this is two women talking to each other, and one is revealing as much as the other. Another quote. But I really do believe there are things which nobody would see unless I photograph them.
Un ángulo.
Un ángulo, no es un rincón. No es un rincón.
Cierto ángulo.
Es un
Yo sé
rincón,
que
but
tengo
no.
un pequeño ángulo distinto, etc.
This is maybe one of her most photographed, most famous pictures. It was made just steps from my office. I know this tree and this little piece of concrete. I don't know the boy, but 5 people have contacted me and said they are that boy. Which, you're laughing, but it's very interesting, because what they're saying is, I feel like that boy. One of them maybe is the boy, and the other, no, they are not the boy. And so, life, what's that?
Or maybe they all are.
They are.
They all are.
Yes,
maybe.
they all are. We all are.
Todos lo somos.
Okay.
De alguna manera.
You know, I just, he's exasperated with her.
Está exasperado con ella.
Okay. He has a plastic
Tiene una
grenade in his
es
hand,
plástico, es de plástico en su mano.
and he's playing.
Está jugando.
And she has her own weapon in her
Tiene su
hand,
propia arma en su
and
mano.
she is
Y ella
playing.
también está jugando.
And the two
Y
are
los dos están
equal.
en pie de igualdad.
And it's an explosive picture. I use the word very carefully. Okay.
Usamos con cuidado ese término.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good place to stop, but I'm going to show you just a few more things. I think her work is as controversial today as it was when it was first really seen in the 60s. After her death in 1971, the Museum of Modern Art, not my museum, but the other museum, Más Pequeña, did this big show in 1972, and they published a book. And in the book, we only look at the work from 1962 to 1971, even though the show did everything. But the book has outlived the show. And my exhibition looks at the work that's from 62 back to 56. And this you can see is the square. This is the format she would use from 62 to the end of her life. So it's a circumstance of curiosity that the book did not show everything in the exhibition. But it didn't. It gave me a gift. And that's what was upstairs. So let me just show you a few other things, and then we'll take maybe a few questions, and then we'll take a break. Yeah?
2 questions.
Yes?
What's the roll count for these 7 years?
What's
Roll count, how many rolls each year?
in the first 7 years?
So, 100 out of?
1/2 of the total.
Wow.
Yes. I'm really not talking about roll count, I'm talking about frames. Because she's using 35 millimeter, and later she's using 2 1/4, and she's working in a different way. But it's half of the body of work is from 1956 to 62, and half is from 62 to 71.
And this 100 is out of how many? This 100 you have on display is out of
And how many prints?
Yeah.
Well, about 700. Okay, so, but let me clarify. It's worth clarifying. It's half of the total number of rolls, but it's more than half of the total number of images made. It's also half of the total number of known prints.
And how would you grade her as a printmaker?
You'll have to do that yourself when you get upstairs.
Perdón, no escuché la pregunta. Entonces me perdí.
¿Cómo la califica ella haciendo las copias? Pues ella dice que hacía sus propias copias.
She did her own prints. Yes, how to rate her as a... Okay,
Y lo que nosotros vamos a ver son copias originales.
Yes, todas. Okay. Which is the first show? Let me think of this. Yes, it's the first show ever where all of the prints are by her. And here we are in Argentina. Okay, so just a few things. That's my best Spanish. Okay, so just a few things. What is in the archive? So this is what you would see if you came to the archive. Extensive notes about things to do. She made lists. Some people are list makers, some people are not. Some people go to the grocery store and they just see what is there, and some people make a list to what they're going to get. She was fascinated by the world, and she kept very strong notes about what she wanted to photograph. And she also listened and made, what do you call that? She overheard conversation in the bus, on the subway, on the street, and she would write it down. She was a great observer. No, they don't travel. Just showing you what her notebooks are like. And if we can read this, on the left from the bottom, teen gang, belly dancer, couple in jail, Joan Crawford, seance, card game, abysmal couple, wife swapping, all 4, living room person or on piano or ancestors, honeymoon in Niagara, etc. Okay, these are ideas, things she wanted to photograph, and she actually achieved almost everything on her list. She checked them off and she made photographs of them.
Are these open to the public on the net?
Not yet, but I've done a big book called Revelations, which is hard to find. I don't know if it's in the library here. And you can see a lot of it. And then I did this book with the estate, which is filled with her writings, and I think it's still in print. Aperture did it. We did this, we did this in 2003. Yes. Oh, mi libro. Bueno, this is the book from the show. Okay.
¿Está a la venta acá?
Sí. Is it on sale here? Yes.
Perfecto. Excellent. It's an awesomely good book. Okay, gracias. So, her appointment books, this is what they look like. Okay, we're going to do this when we return. Okay, this little thing next. So we're going to take a break. I'm going to check on the lighting. How are we doing on time? Good? Okay. Okay. And
remember, we need your.
Okay. How long is the break? Maita.
15 minutes.
20.
20 minutos.
It's a very well-behaved crowd.
Se portan todos muy bien como multitud.
Okay.
No me escuchan. Lo apagué y lo estoy prendiendo otra vez. Ahí.
I turned it off because it's interfering with the system. Okay, are we good? No.
Estamos todos, sorry, this is blinking. Marian, le dices a la chica de la embajada que no lo puedo prender. Mystery of break. Mystery of break.
A veces cuando se apagan se resetean igual.
Gracias.
Okay, everybody. Class begins.
Comenzamos con la clase.
There will be a quiz shortly.
Después va a haber un examencito.
So for the second part, what I thought we might do is to look a little bit at the whole history of photography. I changed this presentation because I wasn't even, this was a last-minute invitation to speak in a kind of seminar way. So what I did was I pulled together pictures, primarily, if not exclusively, from the Metropolitan Museum's collection, and I just want to tell you a little bit about this. I'm not trying to promote the collection, but I do think we have the finest collection of the whole history of photography in the world. That doesn't mean that we have all the right pictures or that we have depth in every artist, but we collect from the beginnings of photography, which you know is 1839, and we actually collect before that. And we collect all the way till now. And we have two archives, both of which I brought to the museum in my career there. So we have Walker Evans' complete works, that's 30,000 black and white negatives, 10,000 transparencies, his library, his collection of other artists, and his ephemeral collection. We have Diane Arbus' archive, which we talked about. But we also have a history of photography. The Metropolitan was started in 1870, and we started collecting photography then, but we did not have a department of photographs. And even when I started at the Met in 1987, we did not have a department of photographs. We were part of the prints department. But long before there was the Museum of Modern Art in New York, or the Getty Museum, or any of the other museums that seriously collect photography, the Met did. And our collection really began in 1928. We are the first museum in the U.S. and among the first in the world to collect photography as art, not just as documentation of the world of art. So from 1870, when we started, we collected pictures of archaeological digs, sites of research. We have pictures, obviously, of the fronts and the backs of sculpture. We have pictures of the fronts and the backs of paintings. We have pictures that are pictures of artists, starting in the collection. We really did not intentionally collect works of art as themselves. as individual creative expressions of an idea or an individual or a relationship to the world until 1928. And so we're just going to use this as an opportunity to look at some of my favorite pictures. Okay, I'm just being honest. I have a friend here, Carlos, who's in the front row, and he's going to appropriately respond to the 19th century pictures because he loves the 19th century as I do. And those of you who love the early 20th century, I hope you will respond. Again, this does not have to be a lecture. In fact, it's not going to be. And so I'm just going to show you one of my favorite pictures. And by the way, this is mostly American because that's kind of what I was asked to do here, but it's not exclusively American. This is a work, does anyone know who made this picture? And there's not going to be titles on the bottom, so you're going to be quizzed. Does anyone have any idea, first of all, when this might have been made? Loosely.
What is?
That's who?
1800, someone said.
1800s, yes. So it's from the 1860s, and it is by a fellow named Carlton Watkins. And I think, without a doubt, that this is the finest landscape photograph we have in the Met's collection. It's a picture made on a big river, not the Rio Plata. Rio La Plata. Not the Rio La Plata. Okay, it's the Rio Columbia. And it's in the Cascades in the west. And for those of you who have been to the west coast, we have these fabulous rivers. And the picture is from 1868. Can you see it well? I can't even see it. See? Okay, so, but we always have to ask, why was the picture made, right? It's a beautiful scene. Who was it for? Were people collecting photographs in the 1860s? Yes, a few. They collected them in albums, and they were basically kept in libraries. People didn't put pictures on the walls, for the most part. Those of you who know the 19th century here in Argentina, and I've had a crash course in 19th century Argentine photography in the last week. Most of the photographs you see are in albums, and they were exchanged. The photographic business, primarily from 1839 on, in the commercial side, was in portraiture. But there were these large albums. But why was this picture made, Carlos? Okay. Because this man had a patron, and it was the railroad. The railroad was moving track further and further away from San Francisco, up the coast, to extract what? Iron, gold, silver, whatever could be extracted from the land, timber, okay? They were also beginning to have passenger trains, so they wanted to show what you could see. But I don't know if you can see, but all of these things in the foreground are... Okay, so this is a picture about the end of something. It's Eden, but we have fallen. The trees have fallen. It's a picture about beauty, but the reason we can see the river is they have cut the trees on the bank. So it's a picture that encodes that inside of the picture is the end of the innocence of... Yes. And the picture was made from the rail car. So he had his own studio on the train. He didn't even take the camera off and put it on the ground. So there's a picture that looks like beauty, and we call this in the US manifest destiny, which it is the destiny, it's our manifest to destroy the land. And in fact, we did. It was our destiny, and we pretty much destroyed the rest of the world too. So, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Now you can't see the picture for what it is, however. So what kind of a print is it? It's a print this big. It's a mammoth plate. It's made with albumin silver technology, so it's a glass negative. the size of the print that Watkins needed to make. It was printed in the sun, and it is one of the great works in the collection. We acquired it in 1979, when I was young. But we have to go backwards in time. And we have to go backwards in time to the first set of pictures that were not acquired for any other purpose other than beauty. Very good. Alfred Stieglitz. And who is the subject? Giorgio. So, Stieglitz was the first photographer to sell works to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And in 1928, we acquired 22 photographs. Many of George O'Keeffe. They were married. She was much younger. And he was married when they met. He separated from his wife. And when this picture was made, they were just getting to know each other in a kind of intimate way. And in 1922, we acquired these 22 photographs, including this one. And this is a silver print, a gelatin silver print. I don't know, yeah, I can see it. She's standing on the radiator in the window of Stieglitz's studio. Behind her is a kind of plastic curtain that modulates the light. And she was a beautiful woman. She was a great artist. And he showed her charcoal drawings the first time. He had a friend in common with O'Keeffe who was teaching school in Texas. And the charcoals were sent, the drawings were sent, and they were abstract to Stieglitz, who was the first person to show Matisse, Brancusi, Cézanne in the United States. He had the first contemporary art gallery. Showed very few photography. But he started showing George O'Keeffe, and then he photographed her extensively. It's an extended portrait of hundreds and hundreds of prints. And it included this first acquisition of 22. It included, I think, among the sexiest pictures in the collection, and I mean that in the most general sense. Pictures that deal with the eroticism of the body, which every artist for 2,000 years has explored. And Stieglitz had a subject that he had obviously a personal connection to. But these pictures, also, by the way, that was from 1918, okay? These pictures that he made, here she is, in front of her charcoal. She was a powerful woman. And she made an expressive body of work, which, if you do not know, I highly recommend that you look at. It's the first show of a woman artist that Stieglitz made, was of O'Keeffe. And he immediately started photographing her. And this extended portrait went on from around 1917 until the end of his life. The pictures are not just silver prints, though. They're platinum and palladium. These are two metals that are like silver, can be made to be light sensitive. You can see the tonality here. She's breathing. The camera exposure is long. The chest is inhaling and exhaling. It's not sharp. It was radical even then, as it is today. These pictures, when they were shown at the Met in 1929, caused a stir because they were so real. They were so much a part of the history of art, but they were freighted by this seeming reality. And this struggle, this tension, is still in photography today. Photography is burdened, the art of photography is burdened by its subject, and yet the subject is what it is. So it's fascinating. Anyway, he made 350 pictures, printed 350 pictures of her, and we have 200 of them. This, I will invite you, if you want to treat yourself to something extraordinary, come and make an appointment in our study room and look from beginning to end in chronological sequence of Stieglitz's portraits of O'Keeffe. It's one of the lifetime treats you will give yourself. Her body was unbelievable to Stieglitz, and to me too. We use a term in English, gorgeous. Someone, you would say something is gorgeous. Do we know the root for the word? Okay, so this is called the gorge. And we even when designers choose their models, they often look for this. There's the definition. George O'Keeffe had this absolutely beautiful shape. And Stieglitz was obsessed by her hands, her feet, her sex, her face, the whole thing. And he literally photographed her like a doctor looks at a patient. It's kind of amazing, and with love. In Stieglitz's life, he wanted to show photography, and he showed the greatest photographers that were coming through New York and around the world, including Edward Steichen, who made this picture, Paul Strand, and others. And this is not a color photograph. This is a black and white photograph with gum bichromate, which is a technology that some of you know. It's a very hard thing. It's embedded pigments that are in the structure of the photograph. This image is from 1904, before the invention of color photography. It's a picture of the Flatiron Building in New York, and it's very large. And it's also one of the treasures in the collection. Why am I showing you this, though? Stieglitz loved the photographers that he showed in his gallery so much that it hurt him that he couldn't sell anybody the photographs that he was showing. I mean, it really hurt him. So he paid the artists for all the works that they actually showed, whether he sold them or not. He happened to be wealthy. And so, by 1933, when he decided that photography could not be sold, there was simply no market, he had the greatest collection of photography, and he donated it to the Metropolitan Museum, including this one. The exciting thing for this gift is that we can see the development of a medium in the beginning of the 20th century. Now, 1933, just like it was in New York, as it was here, after the crash, or whatever you call the break or whatever, in 1929, it was the Depression, and we received at the Met this gift, and it again transformed the story of art at the Met. And I'm going to show you just other pictures from this suite of pictures. We don't have one, we have three different prints of this image. And I say the prints are large. They're as large as could be. It took Steichen all winter long, around 1905, 6, and 7, in those winters, to think about how photography could be like Whistler, could be a tone poem. So it is the same image printed with different pigments. And this painterly aspect was something that Stieglitz espoused in his gallery. But by 1916, when World War I was defining the cultural moment, he moved away from the painterly photograph to the more real. Thus you see the pictures of O'Keeffe. This is what he starts showing in 1916. I'm sure you must know this picture, Paul Strand. So Strand was a young artist who came to show Stieglitz his photographs. This is the picture that Walker Evans saw first and said, whatever that is, that's what I want to do. So those of you who know the documentary style work of Walker Evans, which is part of a long tradition of realism in American photography, he is looking at two things. He's looking at August Sander, the German typological photographer and portraitist, and Paul Strand. This is 1916, and this begins the same question. This is a picture that Diane Arbus loved as well. It asks the question, what is the role of the camera in our society? What should we look at and what should we not? This woman cannot return the gaze of the camera. She's blind. She has got a sign that says she's blind. And she has something else around her neck. And what is that?
Brooch.
It's a brooch, yes.
Sí, es un broche.
Special.
Es
Un
especial.
número.
It's numero. It has a number on it.
Tiene un número.
It's a special license
Es una licencia especial
Street vendor.
to be a street vendor.
para poder vender en la calle. Para vender
So
ambulante.
to sell, to be on the street selling pencils or apples or anything, blind individuals could apply for a license to be a seller of any number of goods, often pencils at the time. So she has a license because she is blind. And the question is, reflexively, what license does Paul Strand have to make this picture? And this issue of the propriety of looking, of using someone else's image for your own purposes, this is something that has freighted all photographers, which is this sort of core lesson of ethics. What ethics do painters have to live by? What ethics do sculptors or draftsmen, ceramicists, textile artists, photographers working on the street have to think about this all the time? It is a very interesting psychological and potentially dangerous occupation. We are now with our so-called phones, which are better cameras than they are phones. We are all citizen journalists. We have seen this in all the social protests, even in just the last weeks. I don't know if it's going on here, but every incident between the police and any arrest in the States is now being videoed, is being photographed. It's a very interesting question, and this is going to be forever. Things have changed. So Strand is asking those questions. This is also a large, beautiful print. And so there's this other issue, which is as the print becomes more beautiful and more tactile and more physically attractive, it begins also this question about making beauty out of something that is not. So we have to answer these questions, we have to ask these questions. I just want to show you a few more pictures that, yes?
Mencionaste el propósito del fotógrafo.
You mentioned the purpose of the
¿Cuál era el
photographer.
propósito de Paul Strand
What
cuando
was
tomó
the
esta
purpose
foto?
of Paul Strand here? What was his?
To use the eye and the camera and the heart to look at something we teach our children not to stare at. Why do we tell our children not to look, not to point, not to address the social conditions that are on the edge of pain? And I think that Strand, now remember, this is right in 1916, this is right in the middle of World War I. The world is falling apart, as it is today. The world is falling apart, and this is a metaphor. It's to challenge us, for you to ask that question. That's why the picture was made. Anyone else? it was probably misunderstood then as it is misunderstood today. But I can tell a story about anything. It's what you believe that. I don't know. I didn't meet Paul Strand, although I live 1 block from his home. At the same time that that picture was being made, this picture was being made by another artist, also showed by Stieglitz. And this is part of the crazy story of photography. Now, 1916 and 17, this is a picture made in Pennsylvania of the bottom of the staircase in a farmhouse looking up. And it was made by Charles Sheeler, the painter. He was also a photographer. These two are working side by side. So Sheeler is looking at structure. Strand is looking at social conditions and structure. What's interesting about Sheeler is that Sheeler is working in the same way that the Cubist painters are beginning to look at. So he is being affected by the art that Stieglitz has starting to show. So all of those beginnings of modernism are now beginning to affect artists like Sheeler. So the precisionism in his paintings is seen here, but it's also a deformation of subject in the same way that Gris or Picasso or any of the Leger is doing in painting. And remember, these things are happening when we are having trench warfare. If you avoid the social conditions, you have a choice, okay, to move towards abstraction for political, personal, any other reasons, aesthetic reasons. Okay, so this is a picture made in 1863 during the middle of our Civil War, the American Civil War. And I show this picture right now because in the 1930s, during the Depression, in exactly the time that that Stieglitz's collection came to the Metropolitan, the Met started collecting Civil War photographs. Why? We started collecting these Civil War pictures, and I'll tell you what this picture is about in a second. We started collecting them because the last traumatic moment in American history, the current moment then was the Depression. People were starving, the businesses were failing, the banks had no money, there was the dust storm, we had not enough food, and it was a global crisis. And the government in the 1930s, during Franklin Delano Roosevelt, looked back towards the Civil War to find out what the country did to survive. How did it heal itself? So the Civil War photographs were looked at by the Depression-era historians, and the Metropolitan acquired 500 Civil War photographs in 1933, and this is one. And what you're looking at is a photographer named Andrew Russell, who was on one side of the river, which was controlled by the Union Army, and looking with a long telephoto lens. The bridge has been destroyed, and the people on the other side are the Confederates. They're fighting to keep slavery. The photographer on this side of the river is with the Union Army, is fighting to destroy slavery and to fight to create the Union again. And what's interesting is that this is the only photograph in the American Civil War that I can show you where the people on the other side or in the picture are the enemy, and they're really far away. And the photographer is shooting the picture, and they are the Confederates with guns. And so it's a question. But the structure of the picture is what Walker Evans, we'll look at him in a second, what Walker Evans got from the Civil War. And he was a great collector of Civil War photographs. And before he made his pictures, he looked at these pictures. So when he was emerging as an artist, he was fascinated by the structure of the Civil War photographs, even pictures like this. So this is a work of really importance, also by this guy Andrew Russell. It's from 63 or 64. These are former slaves who were freed by the U.S. Army and are now working to provide the Union Army with labor to fight the war. The invisibility of the African American experience is something that any curator in the U.S. has been looking to do, is to make it visible. And so in all of my work, and in all of the work of the collecting of my colleagues, we have been focusing on what is hidden, what is invisible, whether it's by race or culture or class, by gender. And but these are just beautiful, beautiful pictures. It looks like a snapshot, but this is a picture made with a camera that's this big, that's wooden with a large bellows. This is 2 panels put together. This is by Alexander Gardner, who in my opinion was the best of the Civil War era photographers. This is the ruins of Richmond. Richmond was the seat of the government of the Confederacy. And the reason I show this is not just because I think it's beautiful, but because war destruction looks the same in today's pictures of Aleppo, okay, as it did in the Civil War, as it did in ancient history. And we have not learned our lessons, of course. But this is what the camera could do in the era of the Civil War. We need a little bit of sweetness now. Okay. I don't know if you can read it. There must be some Italian readers. This is a picture made without a camera. I'm not sure we can call it a photograph, but I do. This is what we call a photogram. And it was made in 1839 by William Henry Fox Talbot. So he was one of the 2 inventors of photography, the British inventor. This is one of the rarest things in the world, in my opinion. What are we looking at? Leaves. And
Print of leaves against light.
okay. Okay. What's great about this is that there are different types of leaves. And if you can read the little thing, they're numbered. And he's telling you what those is written on them, 1, 2, 3, and at the bottom, can you read it? One of them is a fig, and the others are different types of leaves. So Talbot was not a photographer, because photography didn't exist. Okay. He was a wealthy landowner with a strong interest in science. And he was an amateur botanist. And he made lots of drawings of leaves, and he couldn't draw very well. Okay, and he used the camera lucida, and he traced. Okay, he wasn't very good at that either, and he finally worked with a scientist named Sir John Herschel, who was working on silver salts. And the invention of photography comes from the inability of somebody to draw, and the fascination that Talbot had with botany, okay, and the concurrent interest in ways of using silver salts to replicate things. Does anyone know Wedgwood? The name Wedgwood. Do you know the ceramics? Okay. It's blue and white ware. Do you know what I'm talking about? No? Oh, okay. So late 18th century, early 19th century, Wedgwood sold ceramics that had beautiful decorations, which had to be hand painted. And he thought there must be a way to sell whole sets of decorated ceramics with the same design but perfectly done. And so he created a stencil and applied it using silver salts, so that you just trace the lines, so it was not done by hand. This gives birth to a whole technology of using silver salts to create and transfer design from one medium to another. I'm speaking too fast. You are so good. Okay. Okay. Bastante café.
¿Se entendió? Sí, sí.
Okay, I will slow down.
Okay. It's okay.
Okay, so Wedgwood had this idea. Herschel was a scientist. Talbot was trying to communicate his passion of botany. And this is a page. This is a sheet mounted to a page in an album sent by Talbot with these early images, including this one, to a botanist in Italy who he is communicating with. And it's the perfect thing. You fold it up, you put it in the mail, and these are the Italian botanist's notes on Talbot's pictures that he has sent in the mail. And the Met acquired, again during the Depression, in the 1930s, this album filled with Talbot's pictures. It's the rarest thing we have. Okay. And it's just it's a beautiful thing. It's called the Album di Disegni Fotogenici. It's one album. It has about 30-something images in it, and you can see it online through our website. And it's just, the pictures were sent from England to Italy in June of 1839, from June of 1839 to June of 1840, and I think they're 36, and they're called photogenic drawings because it's before photography. Okay, they're fantastic. But there was this other guy in France who came up with almost exactly at the same moment a totally different way of making a photograph. So Talbot coated the emulsion of silver salts on a sheet of paper and put that in the camera, or made it with contact with the leaves, and made his images. And so there's a negative and then a positive, just like we have today, except now we have digital, so we don't.
We have nothing today.
What do you have in your hand? Okay. In France, this guy Daguerre, who was not a photographer because photography had not been invented, but he had a thing called a diorama. He was a painter, and he had a theater, and he painted these landscape views and scenes, and these were on long canvases that were rolled from one side to another, a kind of narrative, and it was pulled across, and it was illuminated both by reflected light and then behind by transmitted light. So it was very much of a light experience. So anyway, Daguerre made a lot of money also, and he was put into contact with a man named Niepce, who was inventing this technique. And this is a sheet of copper. It's called a daguerreotype, named after Daguerre. Daguerreotypo. It's a sheet of copper that is covered with a silver emulsion, polished to a mirror-like finish, sensitized with various other chemicals like mercury and iodide, becomes a light-sensitive surface. It's put in a camera, like the camera lucida, or a camera obscura, and it is exposed with a lens to a subject. This is one example. This is in the Met's collection. This is not a Daguerre type. There are only a handful that survive, but this is from 1850, so a decade later. And this is of the statesman Daniel Webster, and it's a large, it's a full plate, and that's 25, a little less 25 centimeters in vertical, 20 something centimeters. They're unique. It's like a Polaroid. Okay, there's no negative. So the drawback for the daguerreotype was, if you wanted a copy of it, you had to re-photograph it. There's no negative. So Talbot's technique wins the day because you can make any number of copies from the negative. Daguerre's technique is more beautiful in my opinion. It has seeming three-dimensionality, and it was very alive and well here in Buenos Aires, from the 1840s to the 1860s, 65. In the States, it ends about 1860. The Americans did not invent photography at all, but we took it as our own, claimed it. Okay, here's another guy, wonderful guy, Rufus Choate. You see the studio, it has a fake column, it has a fake bust. He's actually got a real book in his hand. But these images, even in reproduction, I think you can see they have an amazing three-dimensionality. This is 1850. Okay, back to England. This is Sir John Herschel. This is the guy who really invented the positive-negative technique and the action of silver salts. And this was photographed by the great woman portraitist,
Julia Margaret Cameron.
Julia Margaret Cameron. I named my daughter Julia after this great lady who was given a camera by her children and said, you probably could make art out of this, and she did. Old man, one of the great figures of the 19th century. But this is really a portrait. It's not an allegorical portrait. It's a portrait of an inventor who gave birth to the medium that allowed Cameron to photograph it. She's working in the 1860s. But Cameron wanted more from photography than just as a likeness. And this is a picture of a subject, but the title is The Mountain Nymph, Sweet Liberty. The Mountain Nymph, Sweet Liberty. Her psychological presence is kind of like that other artist, Diane Arbus, is it not? Arbus felt that we all were myths of our own selves. Cameron felt that the camera's real value was in allegory. And so she would take her friends and her neighbors and her friends' children and, if you will, dress them up to perform for the camera. And it's a fascinating thing. These are just beautiful objects. They're albumin silver prints again from glass negatives. We're moving forward in time, and I know we have miles to go before we sleep, but we're just going to move forward. So in the US, the greatest, one of the greatest painters of the late 19th century is a fellow named Thomas Eakins. And Thomas Eakins was the first teacher of art. He taught in Philadelphia to require his students to do two things. One, to learn medicine, because he felt that any painter had to understand the muscle structure, the bone structure, that idea of classical training in the arts, that you have to see what's underneath the muscles and in the jaw, in the torso, in the legs, in the pelvis, to understand how to draw properly and how to paint properly. I'm sure there's equivalent here in Buenos Aires. The second thing he demanded his students is to learn photography. That he felt like in the age of photography, a painter, a sculptor, a printmaker had to understand this medium or he was going to be illiterate. Okay? The idea of literacy as an art and the role that the camera plays in that was very much a part of the late 19th century and very part of the early 20th century, and then it stopped, sadly. I love this picture. It's a self-portrait. Eakins is on the left, himself. On the right is his student. And Eakins was one of the great teachers, and then he did something he wanted to do, but the school did not appreciate it. He had male and female students, and the male students always had the privilege of drawing from the female nude. The women were not allowed to draw from the male nude. But Eakins said, this is not fair. So we had male nudes, fully naked, as well as women, female nudes, fully naked in the studio. And the women, one of the students, the 17-year-old fantastic painter, showed her fellow student what she had done, and Akins was removed from teaching for violating the decorum of the day. We are a very puritanical society. We are still a very puritanical society in the US. And this idea of the teacher posing naked himself, anyway, it destroyed him, sadly. And his paintings, his late paintings, are imbued with this sense of loss and pain and their patterns. Okay, so just a few things. Here's Stieglitz, made by Steichen. This is what the guy looked like. Just thought you should see it. It's charming. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So this is, if you will, George O'Keeffe's husband. This is one of Stieglitz's own great pictures, city view, out the window of his studio, with a dusting of snow on the roofs. These are all around 1915. We're moving forward in time. Okay, so the next generation of artists I'm using to tell a different story. That's the same story but different. This is Walker Evans. This is a picture you do not know, I'm sure. This is a picture of a torn movie poster. Actually not a movie poster, it's a circus poster. Where the wind and the rain has destroyed the surface, and it takes on this surreal meaning. It's from around 1930. It's in our collection. Walker Evans was one of those artists that carried the torch of photography from the late 20s all the way into the end of his life in the 1970s. His advocacy for the medium was critical to the development of American photography. I'm just throwing some pictures at you. We are moving forward because I want to have a little discussion at the end. Anyone have any idea who made this picture? Very good. And do we know the subject? Singer. Not Tina Turner, but her predecessor.
Yes.
It's a tough one. If anyone gets it, they really deserve a cerveza. No. No? Before? Well, Marian Anderson. Yeah. So she was the first black singer to perform in Washington in a formal way. She was just a powerful lady. And this is a picture from 1955. This is the moment of civil rights, beginning of the struggle. This is the moment of the segregation of race in America. So we, at the Met, started doing large-scale photography shows in the late 50s and the early 1960s. We started showing artists like Richard Avedon, Walker Evans, Irving Penn as the Americans. We started doing big exhibitions with artists like Brassai, Brandt in England, Brassai, the French photographer Cartier-Bresson. We had an international program, and it was progressive for us. Obviously, MoMA started in 1930. They were doing a similar program. We have to get to Diane Arbus. So this is from 1967. So you will remember, I'm sure, the picture of the twins in the jar in the circus. So Arbus was obsessed by twins. Why? Because they are born with an other that they are connected to. And these existential questions about who am I? How am I different from my sister or brother? Twins have to deal with. Is anyone a twin? No twins in the room? Oh. Usually,
not that common here.
What's that? Not that common?
No.
Oh. So Victoria Gerardo, who's my colleague here at Malba, she's a twin, but she's not here. I mean, she's not here in the room. So these are not Siamese twins. They are separate. But what has the photographer done?
¿Qué ha hecho la
La pegó.
They got them together.
Yeah. So I had this picture up in the museum,
Yo la tengo en el museo, esta fotografía.
and I got a call, and it did a very big show.
Ese era uno más grande.
I got a call from the bookstore
Y la librería.
manager. He said, Jeff, you've got to come down to the bookstore. The twins are here. I said, excuse me?
Dije, perdón.
She said, the twins are here, and they're signing your book.
Y te estás firmando tu libro.
And in fact,
Y de hecho,
Colleen and
Colleen
Kathleen
y Kathleen, que son,
were in the shop
estaban ahí en la librería.
signing for people who were buying my
Gente que
catalog
compraba las copias.
under their picture. And I said it was like, you know, one of Goya's subjects or Rembrandt's subjects
O de Rembrandt.
signing.
Que aparezca
It was
firmado.
crazy.
Era increíble.
And then
Y
pardon me,
luego
someone grabbed me,
alguien lo agarró así.
and it was their
Lo
mother.
llevé en la mano.
And she said, and I made their dresses. Which I love.
Me encantó, me encantó.
Okay, so
Y fue que le firmó un libro.
And she wanted also these books to be signed as well.
Yes.
Perhaps, she says, the mother wanted to sign perhaps as well.
yes, she wanted to, as usual.
También
Yes.
quería participar.
Yes, yes. So they're kind of. I'm a lucky guy. They're kind of
Tengo mucha
amazing,
suerte.
amazing
Suceden
things. But
cosas increíbles.
so she had in her diaries
Entonces, en sus diarios,
for many years that she wanted to photograph twins, and this was made at a twins convention.
y esta era una convención de mellizos o gemelos.
Seriously.
En serio, había una convención.
As I said, she made lists, and this was one of those things that she checked off for years and years and years. And she realized it in
Se dio
1967.
cuenta, el 67,
It's in the show upstairs.
How old were they when they showed up?
que ya tenían... The girls,
Well,
Yeah, let me think.
está pensando, le preguntan qué edad tenían.
In their late 40s, 50s, maybe they're 50, in their early 50s. They were with their spouses, their husbands, their mother, and each of them had 3 children.
Cada una tenía 3
It was like the whole thing.
Toda la familia
Okay,
apareció.
it was like the whole thing. You should see these pictures of them. So they were not wearing identical outfits. One of them was wearing, same dress, but one of them was sort of in a kind of pink, very chic, a kind of pink color, the other one was in green. Same dress though. It's fantastic. I'm making fun of it, but it was real, and it was beautiful. And so of course I asked them, you know, what did you think of the picture? And they said in very sort of simultaneously,
Simultáneamente
okay,
contestaron.
they're still trying to remember what they thought of the picture because Diane had a relationship with him for many years, so this was like something, but the myth around this picture, you know, this is the image that was used in The Shining, the movie. So the myth around this picture has removed their own memory of what it is, so they were being honest with me, and it was like, okay. So. But she also understood the shape of the city, and when you go to the show, you will see New York encoded beautifully behind the subject. So it's like an actor on the stage, I think it's pretty interesting. Okay, so I just want to get through the history of photography because I was asked to try to sort of move us forward. I would just say that we are interested in the 60s when things started changing and conceptual practice a la Warhol started changing the relationship of the photograph to the cultural scene. So this is a book, I'm only showing you the cover as symbolically. This is by Ed Ruscha. Ed Ruscha is a painter and he used photographs in a very droll and banal way. And we have a great collection of 60s photography, and I think there's really good 60s photography here in Buenos Aires. Those of you who are interested in this medium and are students or looking for dissertation subjects, this is a really interesting space. It's when photographs are fighting with themselves and with the culture at large. In the States, we have people like Robert Adams who are reverting back to another kind of narrative. This is a outside movie theater, drive-in. Do you have them here?
Un autocine.
You have drive-in.
Not anymore.
No, we don't have them anymore either.
Nosotros tampoco. Un autocine.
But this idea of blending the artificial with the natural, this sort of emptiness. So Robert Adams, who's still alive, is one of the great picture makers of the U.S. Not so well known here. I highly recommend you look at his work. This is my guy Walker Evans. This is made with a hidden camera, and the reason I show this is it's on the subway, made between 38 and 41. Because this is exactly what artists was not doing. They knew each other very well. He has hidden his camera in the folds of his winter coat and strung the cable release down his arm into his hand. He is looking at the subject sitting directly opposite him, but he doesn't want to interact with them. And he does this in a certain conceptual way. But that is the opposite of what artist does. Artist wants that direct connection. She, on the left, is looking at him, but all she knows is he's doing something and not revealing what he's doing. She smells it. We're going backwards and forwards. And that's what Le Gray. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, so why do I show this now? We live in a time of digital manipulation, where we're not quite sure what's real and what's not. So Le Gray was the first photographer to manipulate his prints expressively. This is called the Great Wave. It's the Mediterranean. It was made in 1857 from two negatives. There's a negative in the foreground that includes the little fort, and above it is the sky. The sky was made over land and not the sea. The foreground is the wave. It's like an action photograph. It is made up in the darkroom by putting two glass negatives together. So these are things that are embedded in the history of photography. Faking it has been part of the history of photography from the beginning. It's fascinating to me. Back to this. This is the real thing. But what's hiding in it is all those cut-off trees, the railroad that allows the picture to be made, the patron that you cannot see, the marketplace for this image. And I just want to complicate the history of photography for you. Anyone know this artist? Artists. Becher. Bernd and Hilla Becher. These are German photographers who Walker Evans really did not know. They were looking back at August Sander, and they photographed, in this case, water towers in many countries to look at change in form and typology. The idea of compare and contrast. It's like a Linnaean. We all know Linnaean. Yes. Linneo. Yeah. So this idea of collecting butterflies or plants, or collecting natural specimens in the modern world. How do we do that? So the Beschers have this idea of a kind of taxonomy of form as a kind of intellectual and visual exercise. But that gives birth to another artist named, this is a tough one, other German artist. Struth, yes, Struth. Thomas Struth. So in the 70s he got a grant from the German government to come to New York. This is what New York looked like in the 70s. It was kind of industrial decline, and he made these views just straight down the center of the street. So Struth is a friend, and I realized that he kind of saw the world through two lenses. Bernd and Hilla Becher, and at the Dusseldorf School, and simultaneously Walker Evans and Stephen Shore, the American photographers. Very interesting. But the language of photography is much more complicated. And the language of photography is also about made-up things. And I don't want to even suggest that it's not true. So this is 1920. This is Man Ray. And he calls this compass. Compass? You know the same?
No, composition.
Una brújula.
Una brújula.
Una brújula.
It's where you...
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So what kind of a compass could this be? This is conceptual art that looks as good today as anything. Just look in the art world, go to the galleries. This is, okay, this is Man Ray in 1920. 1928. Umbo, Otto Umber. Now, the picture is weird, okay, because all he has done is turned it upside down. So kind of, okay, and so what's insubstantial is substantial, and what's substantial is insubstantial. This idea of conceptual practice is built into the medium of photography. We have it in different ways. So this is L. Lissitzky, the great Russian artist, where he simply cut his photograph, sliced it, and separated it of a what's this called? Hurdler, yes, of a hurdler, where he segmented the time. This is a complete collage of foreground and background. These are just fantastic things. I showed you Charles Sheeler before of the underside of the steps. This is his most famous picture. This is the Ford Motor Company in River Rouge in Detroit. Precisionism, you know his paintings. This is the kind of photograph that is filled with a delight in form. But the delight in form appeals in many ways. This is Moholy-Nagy, the great Czech artist. Back to Talbot. No negative. This is his hand, a paintbrush, and some other metal things laid down and very interestingly complicated. I tried to duplicate this. I wanted to know how it was made. It's very complicated. I still don't understand it. This is 1926. I thought I would just sort of end with a few more pictures and then we'll answer some questions. This is my friend, certainly the greatest photographer I've had the pleasure of getting to know, Helen Levitt. She died a few years ago. I met her when I was a student in college when I was 18, and I wouldn't be here without her. She believed in me. I was fascinated by her. She was a friend of Walker Evans, so she told me great Walker Evans stories. This is a picture made in the city, in Harlem, and she's working in the Cartier-Bresson school, but her social content is very specific to the city itself. And it's just a little epiphany, and that's enough for me. We need more epiphanies. I'm purposefully moving backwards and forwards because it allows me to talk. That I went to Guillermo Cuitga's studio yesterday. He's one of your great painters, and he is working on a kind of altar that has like a flat and side. What do you call that? No, it's like a religious. Yeah. Triptico. Yeah. Okay. And so this is again Watkins in Yosemite, the big wilderness area in the west. And when I saw Guillermo's studio and he's painting in an abstract way, I felt like we're back to this moment of the ambition of the 19th century or the 18th century or the 17th century. This is my favorite daguerreotype in the Metz collection. It's by a photographer named John Fitzgibbon. One of the beautiful things about photography is that it allows us to see people who we would otherwise see. This man breathed the same air that's on that plate. This is a sheet of silver, a sheet of copper with a silver surface. The photographer has painted the red in the headdress. Those are bear claws in the necklace. And on the two sides you can see something. One is the name of the photographer and the date and the name of the subject and the tribe in which he comes from. It's a stunningly beautiful picture of a man who stopped in a photography studio in 1853, and we're still looking at him. This is just a beautiful thing.
It's a 6 plate?
It's a full plate, my friend.
No.
Yes. This is the little bit of, is it this big? Or is it this big? It's this big. So pictures tell stories. Some of them we understand. This is a French photographer named Aguado. We put this on the cover of my book called The Waking Dream, Photography's First Century. It's very hard to find. It's 250 pictures from one collection that we acquired at the Met. We put this on the cover because, in fact, it asks more questions than it answers. Is it about hairstyle, coiffure? Is it about her beautiful shoulder? Is it about her hair design? We don't know, but it was a nice way to think about things. Or this picture, Talbot's masterpiece. Yes. It's called The Open Door. But it's a made-up picture, you know. You open the door, and then you place the broom exactly the same angle as the shadow. This is not the document. It's a picture. Sugimoto. This is a picture that looks like it's of an ocean. It's of a sea in Switzerland. He made these pictures about yin and yang, the sky and the water surface. Beautiful pictures. Irving Penn, the subject of my current show at the Met right now, his nudes really build on Stieglitz's nudes. Avedon of Maryland, looking quite vulnerable. This is a picture I just bought for the museum. There was an auction in Paris. This is a daguerreotype of a father trying to get his son to sit still for the camera. And both of them are doing a pretty good job. It's this big, it's a masterpiece. This is maybe the last picture of note that I have brought to the museum's collection. This is by a French artist named Giraud de Pranchy. This is the first picture that we know was made in Africa. It's made in Alexandria. It's certainly the first picture of a camel. And it's from 1842. So the daguerreotype is invented in France and it travels the world. And just like every photographer today. More pictures from my Irving Penn show, the petit métier or small trades pictures. On the left, a French waiter. On the right, these are from 1950, the fishmonger. I'm interested in occupational portraits, and if you have any, call me. This is a picture I put in from my friend Carlos. So this is a woman named Sojourner Truth. She was born into slavery. Her name was Isabelle Bonfrey. Can you read what it says? I sell the shadow to support the substance. So the idea is that she was a slave. She was given freedom from her master. She went on a lecture tour to raise money for the anti-slavery cause. And she went to Detroit, big motor city, not then but now, and she sat for her own portrait. She copyrighted the image. She's the first woman to copyright their own likeness in American legal history, the first black person to copyright her own likeness. And she sold the photograph to raise money for the cause, to free her brothers and her sisters. It's an amazing picture. And she's knitting. Women's work. She's trying to sew the society back together, literally. That guy looked great. This is the French and the English flutes together from the 1850s. Stunning picture. You have to think about this and Sugimoto at the same time. We mentioned Thomas Struth. These are the restorers in Italy, in Milan. Charles Marville, the documentarian of Paris. He made these pictures. Why? These are just my favorite pictures, so I'm just throwing them out there. When I was in my hotel room, I was like, okay, I'm just going to put them in. Why not? So, this is a picture made for the city itself. So Paris was going to cut apart the medieval Paris during Haussmann, during Napoleon III. They're going to build those boulevards. Why were the boulevards cut through the old Paris? Who's the political historian here? So the army could go from one side of the city to the other and move the troops into place and fight the resistance, and they destroyed these streets. And the city was smart enough, very good, the city was smart enough to hire a photographer to photograph what was being lost. Look how beautiful it is. Thomas Roof, yes. So when the World Trade Towers were attacked, the images were on television, and Roof was in his studio in Germany, and he made the image off of the television. And wow, with intention, he enlarged it too large, so I think we call it pixelated. And I think this is the best example of why we love art, because this thing which was an inherent problem for many years in photography, which is that the digital files were not large enough to make large pictures, is used purposefully to make a picture that shows the destruction of the image, the destruction of life in a building, and it's the size of this wall.
What is it called?
It's called JPEG NY02. Yes. It's just the image.
The file.
Yes, the file. So just four more. Jeff Wall, the Canadian artist from Vancouver who makes light boxes. They look like they're documents. This is called the storyteller. So in the lower left, there's a group of people around a little fire. And then there's some people in the middle distance under the trees who are sleeping, vagrants. And then there's a guy on the right who is not invited to the party. This and it's under an overpass. So this is all a construction. He's a painter, studies the history of art, and then he makes pictures like this, which are inventions. They're real photographs. They're made from one image, but everything in them is constructed. Or this picture, which is now back to Talbot again, this is a daguerreotype, quite large, by Adam Foose, the British photographer who lives in New York. And this is of a drop of water and the rings and then a flash. And it's about a little bit about science, and it's a little bit about ephemeral, and it's a little bit about the beauty of the natural world. And it doesn't really translate, but it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The Met has a great collection of video art. I'm not an expert in video art, so don't challenge me too much. But what I like about this is, so this is a guy named David Hammond, who's an African-American artist, who's a painter primarily, but he made a video called Fat Free. And we acquired it. I brought it into the collection because it begins in darkness and it goes to light. And it begins with only sound, and he is kicking this can. This is a metal pail. Yeah, that you would hold water. You put a microphone in it, taped it in, and he kicks it down the street. It's a very beautiful sound. It's percussive. And it begins in darkness, and then it slowly emerges, and he's kicking the can through basically the city. And it's such an aggressive sound, and people clear the way. And it's about being a black man in America at a time, and he is struggling to find his place. And it's this beautiful thing, and at the end, with a football kick on the rim, he picks it up and he catches it and holds it to him. It's a stunningly beautiful. It's on view right now, which is why I'm showing it. And last, Gabriel Orozco, the Mexican sculptor, painter, and photographer. Last time I was in Mexico City, I went to his studio. This is a photograph which is just what it looks like of sand on the table. I'm very interested in in artists who are coming into photography from different ways and are still finding it just as a beautiful medium as I do. That was a whole history of photography, wrapped in a story about putting Arbus into context. But it's a pleasure to work at a place like the Metropolitan. We have 85,000 photographs. We cover everything. Probably too much, but every day I get a kick out of going to my job, which is hardly a job. It's a pleasure. And for those of you who are wondering about the medium, come and visit me in New York, and I'll show you some of these objects in the flesh, which is how you should say it. Thank you very much. Okay. So we're a little past time because I couldn't stop showing pictures. The opportunity is for a little bit of a discussion or some questions. And I will just say this. Malba will open this show on Thursday. And I'm not going to tell you much more about it other than I promise you it's like no other show you've seen. And I mean not just the images, but the way it's presented. And they have indulged me. And it's a very special way of looking at pictures, and I know you will like it. So I want to thank my Malba friends for hosting me, and thank you all for spending your day. I don't know what you get to do, but I'm glad you were with me today. So, okay. Yes?
Coming back to Diane, I was wondering whether you see someone like her or like her art today in the art scene. And where do you think that street photography stands today?
Right, so the question is, do I get to see artists like her in the art scene today, and
where do you think street photography stands today?
I can answer the first part better than the second part. But let me try with the second part. Where do I see street photography today? I think it's going on all around us. I think it's a lost art. And I wish I saw galleries showing it. I know people are doing it. It is hard to emerge in any discipline. It's particularly hard to emerge doing something so seemingly traditional as street photography. And the galleries are looking for conceptual practice. They're looking for painting on photography, photography into sculpture. They're looking for video. They're looking for all the things that you know. The good thing is I'm not in the gallery business. They don't listen to me. They don't want my opinion. They do what they do. And I don't want to tell them what to do. But if they listened, I would tell them that this is a real art and they should support it. Okay, so I can't really say. The other part is the, where am I seeing that kind of artist kind of individual today? You know, she emerged at a certain time. And the artists that are emerging today and are working today are exciting me. We are buying contemporary photography all the time. Whether we are seeing the Diane Arbuses of today, I don't know. But I have the great pleasure of having enough of a team of curators that they're seeing things I'm not seeing. I'm hoping that I will discover an artist who is making pictures today here in Argentina. I travel a lot, and I do get to meet a lot of young artists. I do a lot of teaching, and I do a lot of lecturing. My belief is that there are artists being born every day. I want to believe that. I hope you're one. Yeah. ¿Sí?
¿Alguna pequeña historia que te haya contado Helen sobre Eva? Pequeñita.
Oh, yes. Yeah, a couple of stories. What did Helen Levitt tell me about Walker Evans? First, the pictures on the subway were made with this hidden camera, literally right here. And I was curious as to what she knew about it, because when I went through the negative archive of Evans, I saw a picture of somebody who looked like Helen Levitt. And I showed her the image on the contact sheet. And I said, Helen, is this you? And she said, no, no. I never had as nice a winter coat as that. Which told me something. So, like, 6 months later, I had another meeting with her and I said, Helen, I know you didn't have a winter coat, but could someone have given you a winter coat just like that? She said, yes, his wife. So it was like this. So she was the model for how to manage it because he couldn't focus. It was preset focus and preset exposure. And the subway is really good because the distance from one seat to the opposite seat is the same. And in wintertime, he could hide the camera. And he photographed not during rush hour, because during rush hour, everybody is holding and it's interrupted. So he was always photographing people who were on their way from work if they'd worked late or whatever. And he could only do it in the wintertime. So it was like this wonderful thing. Then, in fact, most of Walker Evans' pictures were made with other people present. And so Helen Levitt was very good at that. The second thing she told me was that his way of working was that he made a lot of prints of every given image, and that he cut them differently. He did not believe in the whole frame. And that was something very interesting. So each time he made a print, he cut it literally with a straight razor blade and a straight edge. And when he did, he changed the title. So it's a very, very interesting thing. So what it means is that when you go to public collections, you see different prints of the same negative, and they have different titles and different dates, and that there was not this, I was trained that there's like this one title for every work of art, there's one better one, and she reminded me that he was not like that. He was more like a painter, and he was much more loose about his practice. Curators are very uptight. We feel like we are responsible for placing the object in a context, and it's fixed. But art isn't like that, and it is our failure to accept multiple ways of looking at something. And that's one of the things she taught me. But she mostly taught me about her and how much music was important to her, and how she thought for her, like I said, Diane Arbus was a kind of performative artist. Diane was much more of a balletic artist. She was doing a dance with her subjects. Like you could see those kids walking down the street with the bubbles. She danced with them, and she was invisible. Diane did not want to be invisible, but she wanted to be invisible, and she, for the most part, succeeded.
Thank you.
Okay, está bien. Muchas gracias.